Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 54 of Fracking Nightmare. And I think this is the first time in the studio that I actually haven't been alone. Well, apart from the technical team, of course. But tonight I'm joined by Vanessa Vine. So, Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you.
And yeah, we have already spotted that depending on where Vanessa's head actually is, it does look as though it says King Mayor. So just before anybody makes that comment, we'll make it for you.
Or...
And there we go. So just move around a little bit. Anyway, Vanessa was down in Devon and is going to be here for a little while, so it would have been almost rude, really, not to invite her to join me on the show going out here in Plymouth. And yeah, we're coming to the point now where the new Tory government, of course, has restated its determination to push forward with this abomination, this fracking agenda in the UK. And Vanessa was really very much at the forefront of the campaign some 4 years ago plus now.
Getting on for no, more than 3, but yeah, getting on for that.
Okay, well, there was a meeting, and here we have a picture of the meeting. This is the Balcombe Village Hall, and I think, Vanessa, that was actually a meeting that you arranged.
I did. I went to the wool shop and gave him a cheque for 80 quid and booked it. Yep. That was booked it in November 2011 and the meeting was in January 2012.
And I mean, I heard somebody tell me a story when I was at Balcombe, almost 2 years ago now, and they said they had no idea what the meeting was all about, but they got the impression that they actually needed to attend because it was pretty important for the village.
It was completely packed. It was a very cold January day and we had to have the doors open. People were standing outside, they couldn't get in, and Quadrilla were metaphorically lynched by 299 of the 300 people that were there.
Well, this, of course, was the
oh, dear old Mark Miller.
Chief Executive Officer of Quadrilla. This is Mark Miller. Actually, interestingly, he used to work with my former company, Dowell Schlumberger. He left Dowell Schlumberger in '86, which was about 8 years before I moved to the US. So our paths never actually crossed, but we certainly knew a lot of the same people. But this was actually the meeting that ended his career as CEO. I'm sure you don't feel an ounce of grief over that.
I actually quite like Mark Miller of all of them. He seemed genuine. Maybe that's why maybe that's one of the reasons he's no longer there. Or maybe I'm just being a little bit too empathetic.
Well, I think Mark unfortunately assumed that he was going to really be able to waltz all over the people of Balcombe.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he'd given his... well, I say shareholders, but the major players, the impression that Balcombe was not going to be a problem, and all they had to do was leave it to him. They
were clearly very used to very credulous audiences, and they did arrive with their Pennsylvania leather jackets and their PowerPoint and stood up, and they were with Big Eric Vaughan, who's the COO, the Chief Operating Officer, and they clearly expected everybody just to go along with it, as I guess a lot of people in the States who are used to having a nodding donkey on the prairie and getting the money for it and it not having an impact. But there were quite a few moments in that meeting, including one where somebody asked him what the ingredients were in the fracking fluid, and he said there was only one additive, polyacrylamide, and the person in the audience said, "You do know that's carcinogenic in its conversion to acrylamide," and he said, and I quote, "No, it isn't. Is it?" And yeah, didn't have a clue what he was talking about.
Not giving a lot of confidence. Well, of course, he was replaced by Francis Egan.
Yes.
And I have to say that Francis Egan has aged. I last met Francis about 2.25 years ago, and not long after he'd been appointed into the role, and he was still very bullish. But he's looking very drawn now.
Yes, poor chap.
And of course, Lord John Brown, the former chairman of Quadrilla, has jumped ship now. I think he's realised that basically it's not going to go at anything like the pace he assumed. So he's now gone back into conventional hydrocarbons with Mikhail Friedman of Letter One. So, and of course he's also resigned his commission as a special advisor to David Cameron.
Having been appointed by Francis Maude, who is the MP for Balcombe, as an advisor to the Cabinet Office while being chairman of...
Did Francis Maude stand again, by the way? Did he stand? I thought Francis Maude was standing down.
I'm not sure if he stood this time. That's not my constituency.
Okay, well, because if he's not, then he's on the brink of being elevated to the to the Lords, that's for sure. So this is where it all kicked off in the UK, really. I mean, obviously, you know, in the Fyle Peninsula in 2011 with the Quadrilla disaster there on the Fylde. But then Borkum was the opportunity for people right across the UK to get a feel for what the strength of feeling amongst the local community was.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of the press were saying they thought that the industry had made a huge mistake in having a site which was in middle Sussex, we'll call it, and 35 minutes from London where all the journalists could come and did, and close to Brighton and Lewes and Bohemian communities and ecologically minded people, and thought they'd made a big mistake, but other people thought it was a deliberate litmus test of that demographic, and they got a bit of shock.
Well, of course, the Borkum campaign, 66 days, started on, I think it was July 26th, and that was when the rig arrived. They tried to smuggle the first stage of the rig in, and that was when people started to arrive. And then a few days later, Lord Howe made a very ill-advised comment in the House of Lords, and I think we have that on video here, so watch this.
Would the Minister accept that it could be a mistake to discuss fracking in terms of the whole United Kingdom in one go? I mean, there obviously are in beautiful rural areas where it's not just so much about the drilling and the fracking, which I think are exaggerated, but about the trucks and the delivery on the roads and the disturbance, and those are quite justified worries. But there are large and uninhabited and desolate areas, certainly up in the part of the northeast, where there's plenty of room for fracking. There's plenty of, well away from anybody's residence. Well away from anybody's residence, where it would be conducted without any kind of threat to the rural environment. So would you agree that if there's a distinction should be made between one area and another, rather more than lumping them all together, and if we can push ahead with this kind of gas production, it obviously takes us fast away from the kind of coal burning, which actually is increasing at the moment because of delays in authorising gas production, which the noble Lord Teverson was talking about a moment ago.
Well, you could see there that his colleagues in the House were realising that he was digging a rather deep hole for himself, and of course, not knowing when to quit, he actually dug it deeper. So that was, I think, 3 days after the start of the Borkum campaign, and so this was what was reported on the BBC. We have the page here, online page, and fracking comments. Peer Lord Howe meant the northwest. So having said about the desolate northeast, here's what he was re-quoted as saying. He said that saying fracking should take place in the desolate areas of the northeast has revealed he was actually referring to the northwest. Well, still not knowing when to quit, he actually went on to say that the northeast of England was not in his mind at all when he made the comments, but it came out of my mouth as the northeast. He said it was a stupid error to mention anywhere at all. Well, out of the mouths of, you know, and all that.
Out of the mouths of father-in-law of the Chancellor.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, really what he did was he raised massive awareness.
Yeah.
You know, he got more publicity because of that comment that probably the anti-fracking community could have done in weeks.
He's the gift that keeps on giving. And then Nicholas Soames, who happens to be my MP, who has just been re-elected, in the hustings immediately before the election, just echoed all this. And he said, you can't frack in very built-up areas. It's a silly thing to do. I would go and start in the Trough of Bowland in Lancashire, which is a very underpopulated area. I think it would be a very good place to start because of the infrastructure there that wouldn't trouble people, and they can prove that fracking would work. I'm in favour of fracking, but I would not do it in Sussex.
So if anybody is in any doubt whatsoever, if you're in the north of England, if you're in any doubt whatsoever that the honourable members of the House who happen to represent the South have any desire to upset their constituents by fracking in the south, then there you have it, spelled out in words one syllable. But this was the result. Thanks to Lord Howe's comments, this was one of the days at Borkum over the bank holiday weekend, and where literally there were thousands of people descending upon Borkum. And in fact, it was this weekend that was absolutely seminal in terms of Cuadrilla not being able to complete their operations and running out of time. Because the police had advised them for basically 6 days that they shouldn't bring in any trucks. And so consequently, they ran out of time, had to vacate the site by September 28th, and then, of course, made further application to return. So what's the situation with Balcombe right now, Vanessa?
They have permission to come back if they wish to. There were so many presentations, thousands of presentations from people, articulate, detailed, many-page documents from local residents to West Sussex County Council detailing why they should not give them permission to come back. There have been all sorts of disclosures about West Sussex County Council pension funds being invested in the industry. Regardless of all the logic, all the sanity, all the local opinions, they have given them permission to come back, but they haven't yet. Whether they're biding their time or whether they're just focusing on Lancashire.
Now, the residents of Balcombe did initiate a request for a judicial review, didn't they, after the council decision?
Yes, they got further than that. I can't remember because I'm not actually a Balcombe resident and I wasn't involved specifically with it, how far they got with that. But that did certainly get underway. And it got to the point when the announcement at West Sussex, which was a year ago now, that they said they could come back. What they've done, they have changed the consciousness of a community. And we're coming across, when we see the industry then coming into new areas, whether it's Lincolnshire or different parts of Yorkshire, we're getting the same response that I got from a lot of Balcombe residents when I first went there and tried to warn them and tried to say this is coming. And it was oh, don't be silly, the government wouldn't let it happen if it wasn't safe. You know, go away, don't worry about it. And it has, well, the scales have fallen from my eyes. I was already ecologically conscious and aware of certain things and working on certain things, but I wasn't an activist. I was brought up to vote Conservative and trust the police and the BBC and the Environment Agency, and to believe that if you objected to a planning application, it would have some clout. And I have learned in the last 3.5 years that it is all a farce. And one example of that, when we were at Balcombe during the middle of the protest, there's a chap called Lech Kowalski, who's a Polish filmmaker, who had just come from the Chevron protest in Poland. He actually lives in Paris and has spent most of his life in New York. And he watched what was going on and how the police were behaving for 3 days and turned to me, he said, "You do know you live in a police state, don't you?"
Well,
and I didn't.
I think we're beginning to realise that in a big way.
Having spent quite a bit of time in the middle of winter at the Barton Moss site with the GMP.
Well, we're going to come to Barton Moss because Barton Moss was, of course, the next campaign, and IGAS very conveniently waited for us to finish at Balcombe before kicking off at Barton Moss. And in fact, I picked this picture because this actually shows the first tent I had at Barton Moss. So this is the one that ended up in Iceland, I think, on the basis that it got blown away in the storm along with the rest of the camp. So this was my first tent at Barton Moss. Of course, I then went to a subsequent tent before getting the caravan. But, of course, Barton Moss, you know, brought people from literally right across the social spectrum, and you know, whether it was the elderly or you know, single, but this is not a single parent, sorry, but young mothers, you know,
Yep.
you know, all ages, all political persuasions, all descending upon Barton Moss. Now, you visited Barton Moss, and on one of the occasions that you were there, you were invited by the BBC to debate with Peter Lilly.
It was actually Channel 4 was the news.
Oh, thank you.
I had done a radio thing with him 4 or 5 months earlier on, it was 5 Live, and he came out with the same nonsense that he came out with 5 months later, having been corrected. And after the Barton Moss Channel 4, live Channel 4 news, people then wrote to him questioning what he'd said about there having been 200 fracks and nobody had noticed and all that. And he wrote to Ed Davey and got it confirmed that there had only been one high-volume operation.
Well, let's have a look at that interview, because your facial expressions during the course of this interview are absolutely priceless. So let's take a look at this.
Well, I'm joined now from Barton Moss by the anti-fracking protester Vanessa Vine, and the Conservative MP Peter Lilly is here. He's on the Energy Committee in Parliament and also on the board of Tethys Petroleum, which operates in Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. Peter Lilly, why is Vanessa Vine wrong?
Because this is a technique which has been examined by the Royal Society of Science, the Royal Academy of Engineering, and they said very emphatically that any problems of environment, safety and health can be satisfactorily managed in this country, as we have done over 60 years with the oil and gas industry. We've already, although nobody seems to realize it, drilled 200 wells in this country which have required fracking, no problems. 2 million wells worldwide. Not a single person has been poisoned by contaminated groundwater. Not a single building has been damaged by earthquakes, or so-called earthquakes, these minuscule tremors, which are about the same as are caused by a heavy lorry going over a bump in the road outside your house. So there isn't a problem, other than the concern of these people to stop us using any form of fossil fuels, and therefore they invent and exaggerate fears.
Vanessa Vine, answer that.
Mr. Lilly, you are at best negligent. We have a letter from DEC. There has been one high-volume hydraulic fracturing operation in this country, and it caused earthquakes. It cracked a house. It had people waking up in the night. 80 people have reported damage from it. That was in Lancashire in 2011. It has happened once. You are not speaking the truth, sir. I spoke to you on 5 Live in September, and you were coming out with the same nonsense. This is a novel technology. Many people have been poisoned. There are more than 2,500 families in Pennsylvania, and they're just the ones who've dared speak out, detailing the asthmas, the cancers, the silicosis in the frack field workers' lungs, the spontaneous abortions in their livestock, and in Queensland, Australia, with the coal seam gas, coal bed methane industry, the same. Grandparents speaking out in desperate situation about their grandchildren, the state that they are in and the things that are going on. How dare you lie on live television to the people here? This will not bring down energy bills. All the credible analysts have said that. It will not be an employment
panacea. Let me put that to Peter Lilly, because lying is quite a charge. Are you lying? I mean, you say 200, she says what?
Well, there was one in Morecambe, but there have been lots of others over the country,
in Morecambe,
over years.
Sir, it was in Lancashire.
Just let me finish for a second. I'll come back to you in a minute.
There was an oil well in Morecambe. You're absolutely right. It was in the shale up in Lancashire. There's been one there, but there have been 200 across the country. She accuses me of lying. Fair enough. I'm used to that sort of abuse, though people who resort to that sort of abuse should be viewed with suspicion. Is she accusing the Royal Society of lying? The Royal Academy of Engineering of lying?
All right, just answer that one, Vanessa Vine.
No,
the Royal Academy and the Royal Society?
No, I'm not. That's not what I said. I said that Mr. Lilly is lying when he says there have been 200 fracks across the country and nobody's noticed, and we've been doing this for decades. I have a letter from the Department of Energy and Climate Change. It happened once. He didn't even know where it was. When I spoke to him in September, we'd been drilling in Morecambe for 3 weeks and he didn't know.
Just come to his point about what the Royal Society and the Royal Academy have said. Do you accept his description of what they have said in terms of there being no risk that can't be satisfied?
No. No. As a layperson who lives 4 miles from a potential site in Morecambe, who's been researching this for 2.5 years, who've been speaking to people in Pennsylvania, in Queensland, in Poland, in Romania, all over the world, people who are daring to speak out despite signing non-disclosure agreements about the terrible harm, the water pollution, the air pollution, the seismic activity that is triggered. This is proven.
Priceless. So the only issue I have with you on that interview, Vanessa, is why you held back and didn't tell Lily what you really thought.
There is more that could have been said, but...
I mean, he was clearly extremely uncomfortable, to say the least, but they all are.
So he bloody well should be.
Whether it's, Fallon or Lily, any one of the politicians.
Or Lord Brown, who I called a liar to his face.
Any time that their feet are held to the fire, they can't hold a candle to the passionate campaigner. And as I made the observation of Third Energy a couple of months ago, they're only doing it because they're on the payroll. And passion beats payroll any day of the week.
Which was the point I made there about the relative. And a point it's follow the money. Anybody on social media who questions it and who says, but they wouldn't lie. Why would they do that? Just compare the relative vested interest. What vested interest have I got as a mother who lives 4 miles from a fracking site currently, to do all this and give up my life for 3 years and drive all over the country and put myself through all this media stress stuff, which I've stepped back from a lot now? Why would we do that? What do we have to gain? It's been an absolute... It's turned my life upside down. I don't know how much we've achieved. People say we've achieved a lot, and we've certainly... I remember the day in the kitchen with my son when the Radio 4 News came on. I think it was 2.5 years ago, and they used the word fracking, and then they didn't define it, and I punched the air because so many people, there are still people who haven't heard of it, but then very, very few people had even heard the word. And now, even Gary Lineker the other day on Have I Got News for You? It was a really good moment, that.
Yeah.
Because they were joking all about the earthquakes in Kent and showing the very funny tweets of the "we will rebuild" with the wheelie bin falling over and the garden chair falling over. And then Gary Lineker just came in with a very sobering last minute, let's see how funny they find it when the fracking starts.
Absolutely.
So it's mainstream.
The awareness
and it has to be.
Is definitely increasing very rapidly. Now, just before we go to the break, when I was ploughing through, I came across a couple of other photographs here. This one from Barton Moss, and I have to say that generally I was left alone by the police, but this is a particular officer. This is Officer 12643, and you'll actually see him in action again a bit later on. Actually, I call them corporate enforcement officers. They're not really police officers, are they? But you'll see him in action a bit later on in a clip that I'm going to show from Voices from the Gas Fields. You'll see him full face on, practicing his thuggery. Well, we're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by John and Val Marga up in East Yorkshire, because we're in for a very big month in the north of England. It seems that, for the time being at least, the government and the industry have taken Lord Howe and Nicholas Soames at their word, and they're going hell for leather to frack the desolate north. So let's take a look at this short clip from Voices from the Gas Fields, where we're looking at the magnitude of the incompetence of the unconventional gas industry in this country. Well, apparently there was a little bit of a technical issue with the playing of that short video. So welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. Now I'm joined by John and Val Marga from Beverley in East Yorkshire. So John, Val, you there?
Good evening, yeah.
Good evening and welcome. And I can see it's still daylight up there in the desolate northeast. So, you know, this must make you feel real good that... you know, the government is actually carrying out a stated policy. It's going to frack the desolate north.
Excuse me, Ian. Can you tell me when fracking was mentioned during the election? Because it all went very quiet for about 6 weeks, didn't it?
It was very convenient, wasn't it?
Is it a government policy? They haven't got a mandate. They didn't get their social licence, did they?
They certainly haven't. And I think they're probably about to find that out. You know, John, I was just not too far away from you yesterday. Fortunately, the motorways were clear in the direction that I was travelling, so 500-mile round trip. But I went across to Bawtry, which is, I think, right on the border of South Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire. Yeah. And I joined up with some 200 or so people at Bawtry under the leadership there of the Missing Action Group. And there were people there from North Yorkshire and from East Yorkshire, from Lincolnshire, from Nottinghamshire, plus about 40 or 50 local people from Misson. And this was about a 4-mile walk through the beautiful countryside to the site where iGas want to, and they've been very blatant about it, they want to frack. So this is Yorkshire under serious attack because we've got iGas in South Yorkshire, Rathlin in East Yorkshire, and of course Third Energy in North Yorkshire.
That's right. And the reason being they're sitting on top of a huge amount of Bolan shale, and part of that share of the 1.3 trillion cubic feet of gas they're supposed to be getting out. But of course, the interesting thing here is we've still got the operator with the biggest licence area in the country, Rathlin, who of course insist they are not fracking. Having said that, in a sense, I think it is the protectors that came across from Barton Moss and the local community that have made it a toxic brand here. They can't mention fracking because they know what would happen if they did. We've just celebrated a year since the protection camp started at Crawberry Hill, and the basic point is they haven't done a single day's work on that site.
And they've only got about 5 months to go now, I think, haven't they, before this current planning permission actually expires?
That's right. And the interesting thing is the planning permission that's being offered for the new well at West Newton B, which is being discussed on Thursday, is also temporary, only for 24 months because of the sensitivity of the site. But as we know, Rathlin got past their 24 months last time because every time they breach a planning permission, East Riding Council just says, yeah, well, so what, you know, they're only planning conditions, we're not really that bothered. They just carry on. We're having examples of that today where Rathlin want to now create a soakaway, of all things, into the aquifer at Crawberry Hill rather than using tankers, possibly because 3 of the ageing pensioner power protectors managed to stop a tanker for 2 hours a couple of months back. Also, one of the braver younger protectors achieved a lock-on on a tanker. They're trying to save money, you know. They're just saying it costs £1,300 every time a tanker goes to the site, and we can't afford it. Well, if they can't afford that, this is starting to get dangerously near to a fracking company going under. It's Canadian-owned, of course, and we know that Canadian companies are folding every day now because of the problems created by the low shale gas price and the risk of interest payments going up on the money they borrow.
I must confess, I find it very difficult to comprehend why it is that Connaught Oil and Gas still want to support Rathlin, and when it's very clear that Rathlin do not have the fundamental competence to be able to carry out even the most basic of tasks. I mean, although they're not admitting it, I mean, we certainly believe they lost the well at West Newton A. So the only way they're going to go back to West Newton A is if they get permission to actually drill another well there. But of course, in the meantime, they're looking to build or construct another well at about a couple of miles away at West Newton B.
And in terms of the government, you're talking about government policy, the officer's report, which recommends that they should be given permission, the case for the applicant, as they call it, in other words, the officer's rationale is all about gas. It spells out that the government policy is to exploit shale gas. But there's Rathlin saying, we're not even going to go deep into the Bolan Shale this time. We're going into conventional measures. So you've got this lunacy of a report that says this is all part of the government drive for shale gas. Then at the end of the report it says, but they're not going into shale gas, and anyway we've put a no fracking condition on the planning permission.
Well, you know, this doesn't make a lot of sense either, because what we've got is Third Energy to the north and iGas to the south, and both are being absolutely categoric that they are going for the shale and they are going to frack. But I got just a short video that I took yesterday with the guy who organised the event and is pulling together the Misson Community Action Group. So just take a look at this. This is what happened yesterday. Well, this is ENR Crane. It's the morning of Sunday, 31st of May 2016. And I'm here at Bawtry, which is just, I think, about in South Yorkshire, but just across the border from Nottinghamshire. And the people behind me are going to be walking to Missing Springs, which is about 3 miles away from here. And this is the location where IGAS are seeking permission to sink an exploratory well, and needless to say, the people of the area are not best pleased at IGAS's plans. And IGAS have been a little more transparent than they were at Barton Moss, because they have stated categorically that they will be fracking. So obviously IGAS are not going to get a free ride, and as one would expect, and needless to say that the people here will be doing everything they possibly can to oppose that application. So anyway, let's enjoy the walk to Missing Springs and see where it is that IGAS plan to destroy next.
So the Midland Community Action Group is what it says on the tin. We are a community of people, many of which are around here today, some of which couldn't attend for one reason or another. But we're a group that was set up to voice our thoughts and share our fears and get things going to protest against this fracking nightmare. And I can say fracking nightmare, but I can say it a lot. I can say frack off, yeah? I can say fracking nightmare, I can say get the frack out of here, yeah? And I don't feel bad about it. Because this is our village, it's our environment, it's what we paid into, it's what we bought into, and it's not our choice. 82% of every resident in this village who was asked the question twice, right, we had to do it twice, said they were completely opposed to anything to do with fracking anywhere near our village, or anywhere else for that matter. And that's a huge majority. Right, that's a bigger majority, I think, than the Conservatives can leverage. Not making a commitment, well, not keep it political, but I'm just talking about majorities and what should be able to affect these. If anybody thought a few people couldn't raise a lot more interest, then they were sadly wrong. And if you multiply this across Nottinghamshire, East Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, across the north and south, then they've got something to worry about. We know that the guys at IGAS thought of Mizzen as a very much sleepy village. They were sadly mistaken. Right, all we're doing is choosing our moments. 2 miles up the road, they've put up another few £1,000s worth of safety fencing because they feared we'd all be up there today, strapping ourselves to the gates. Right? Not today. Right? We don't do that today. We're not going to tell you when we're going to do that, all right? Today's about raising the awareness and getting everybody together. And I know on behalf of everybody who was part of the community association, the action group, everybody who's helped support this today, we are immensely proud of every single one of you for taking the time out of your Sunday to come and help support us. Thank you. So from us, thank you. Big thank you.
So Rob, this is the first time that IGAS have been completely open about their intentions. They've stated categorically that they're coming here to obviously drill an exploratory well, and they're going to frack it. They want to get the flow test, and they're very clear that if they get the results they expect, then they want to start to going into production eventually, yeah. Do you think the people of Missing Springs fully comprehend the magnitude of what that will mean to the community?
Well, they understand, based on the information that they've been given, what the process is. They've seen the information as put forward to them by IGAS at their presentations. But nobody can really comprehend what sort of impact it's going to have to the village and Missing Springs and the sort of wider community, other than comparing it to where it's happened before. And what we're trying to do is bring the information to the community and make sure they're more and more aware. Now, we need that community to be receptive to it. We need them to attend events like this. We need them to take part and be more active in terms of their opposition. And hopefully today's been a good start for that. But yeah, IGAS have been upfront. We know where they're going, we know what they're doing, and we've got a pretty good idea of when they're going to try and do it. So that helps us put a plan together in terms of how we're going to combat that, both in terms of local support and then in terms of a strategy for the planning committee.
And of course the British government, I mean, they're no longer constrained by being in a coalition. They've made it very clear that they have every intention of getting this industry rolling as quickly as possible. Of course, the bribes are still being thrown at the communities, £100,000 to a community where a well is fracked, 100% of the business rates. What do you think the reaction of the local community is going to be to this blatant bribery?
Well, interestingly, whilst transporting some of the marchers back into Bawtry, people asked us about the threat to house prices. And the threat to a house price is only relevant if you're thinking of moving from the village. And actually most people want to stay here or move into the village.
It's a beautiful area.
Right? So the house pricing, the money, the bribes, the incentives that are being put to people, they're of no interest to the people of this village. What we want is the same land, the same environment, the same countryside, the same clean air that we're used to now in the future. And no amount of money is going to make any difference to the majority of those people who live in the village. I'm confident of that, and I'm confident of that because we've gone round and we've spoken to the majority of them, and they're of the same opinion. There's no interest from everybody else in this village around the sort of monetary value. We're not even on gas. We don't want gas, right? And yet they're planning on exploring for it, a mile and a half, 2 miles up the road.
Well, it's a great start today, Rob. I mean, it was a fantastic turnout, and obviously there's wonderful community spirit here.
And I'm looking forward to the next stage, and I bet you iGas aren't.
I bet they're probably not. So, there you have it. I'm pleased to be able to report that from my time with the community there in South Yorkshire, iGas are definitely not going to get a free ride. So, John, there you have it. I mean, we know clearly, there's no conjecture here whatsoever. Both Rathlin and Third Energy have been absolutely categoric that they're drilling into the shale and they want to frack. They want to be able to establish the flow rates with a view, of course, to be able to take it to the next stage, i.e. production.
So what you're saying is we've got frackers to the north of us and frackers to the south of us. That kind of makes David Montagu-Smith, he's like a liar between two frackers, really, isn't he?
Well, we know the guy's a liar. If for no other reason, then, we know that he assured the business owner in Sprotely that Rathlin Energy would take full responsibility for the damage caused as a result of their seismic testing. And then a couple of weeks later, when he thought the heat had died down, reneged on that and basically said, well, we're no longer convinced that we were responsible. See you in court.
That's right. And we mentioned Peter Lilly earlier on. He seems to have a knack. One of the new recruits to our activities saw him on television talking about fracking in Parliament and wrote him a long letter describing all the damage done by seismic testing around Sprotely, all the damage done by Rathlin. And so we've got in front of us here the letter that David Montagu-Smith wrote to Peter Lilly to reassure him that, of course, this was all untrue. And he concludes by saying, in all our operations, Rathlin has a policy of compensating for any damage which is established to have been caused by our work. But we do require evidential support for the claims for property damage, which invariably follow any activity such as seismic acquisition. Rathlin has not had any previous claims regarding any of its work. So you've got two sentences where in one sentence he says damage invariably follows what they do. And in the second sentence he says, but we haven't had any claims.
But you can see here what Montagu-Smith was trying to do. What Montagu-Smith was trying to do was basically keep the guy at bay for a few weeks and then basically say, well, hang on a second, it's now a few weeks after the event. How do you know we're responsible?
Yeah, well, it's the oldest trick in the book, isn't it? If you have a car accident, you say, don't worry, I'll pay for everything. Get out of the situation at the time. And then a couple of weeks later, they say, well, you said you'd pay for everything. You say, I never said that. You'd have to talk to my insurer. And you tell the insurer that it wasn't your fault. I've had that happen to me. I'm sure other people have had that happen. It's the oldest trick in the book to apologise at the time and make all sorts of promises.
Well, all I can say is it's very fortunate that the business owner in Sprotely had CCTV in his shop, and that CCTV footage, I think, is going to come in very, very useful. So, the smart thing for David Montagu-Smith to do would be to recognise that, he has a social responsibility here. So, you know, the behaviour of David Montagu-Smith over the next sort of few weeks is going to determine whether or not the guy has a social conscience or he's a simple out-and-out sociopath.
Yeah. The other angle to this, which is very interesting, I think I've told you about Lee Day producing the Objector's Guide to Fracking, which will be available shortly. In the presentation that launched that, what's relevant to this seismic damage or any damage caused by these companies is that people affected can also sue the landowner who allows the oil company to come onto their land. And it is not a defence to say that it's the oil company that caused the damage if it can be proved that you've allowed someone to come and do something, quote, unnatural on your land.
Now, this is actually an extrapolation of the Rylands versus Fletcher precedent of the late 19th century, which is still held in primary British law. So that's absolutely, right. And I would encourage anybody living anywhere near a site that is being targeted should actually do a little bit of research into Rylands versus Fletcher. Because I think, if my memory serves me correctly, one of the quirks of this is that the adjacent landowners should actually serve notice on the landowner that's brought the potentially damaging situation onto their property before it arrives.
That's right. And so the interesting situation at Crawbury, where Bishop Burton Parish Council, where the landowners involved more or less run the feudal village. We told them about the tankers going through the village. They weren't particularly bothered about that, but they were incensed when they found out about the idea of a soakaway being constructed by Rathlin. And it's finally got through to them that the local landowner, who is making big money out of renting the site, has sold them all down the river. You know, he sold out as far as the rest of them are concerned. So you've got the son of the person that originally wanted to rent the land to Rathlin at Crawbury Hill, now up in arms because his house is nearest to the site and most at risk if anything goes wrong as a result of Rathlin having a soakaway. The penny is starting to drop now with the farmers as well. And I don't think the farmers around West Newton A, West Newton B are going to be too happy when the farmer that's leased the land, Norman Cayley, is going to be too happy when he realises he's in the frame and his defence cannot be that it's Rathlin what have done it, not him.
Yeah. Well, now, I believe on Thursday at East Riding Council Planning Committee meeting, it's going to be an adjacent landowner that's actually going to represent the community at the hearing.
Yeah, it's we're really pleased that the people that jointly own the land immediately next to the proposed site are the ones that are going to be given the opportunity to make a 5-minute speech. Vanessa might be shocked. I know people in Lancashire will be shocked to know that in East Riding, democracy means that when you have an oil company coming into town, it's the normal practice here, you get one person allowed 5 minutes to make a speech of objection, and that is it. You don't get 3 days with 100 people being allowed to speak for 3 minutes each. You don't get lengthy planning meetings with objectors allowed to amplify the case and so on. You get 5 minutes. And I'm very pleased that we've got an experienced former Hull City councillor who certainly knows how to put a point across to other politicians and officers able to make that speech. We will be conducting a press campaign beforehand as well to make sure that all the detailed points are made.
So, Vanessa, are you surprised by anything you hear here?
I'm just saying, in a way, maybe it's northern expediency. At least it's honest, because they're going to ignore it anyway. What's the point of having a 3-day hearing, when with 60-page documents that we've all spent months producing, when we know they're going to ignore it? So maybe it's just a bit more direct. I'm laughing, but it's tragic.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I mean, the reality is that, I mean, obviously, it's absolutely essential that we do encourage communities to pursue every possible avenue in terms of, you know, the due diligence in the process. But ultimately, when it is just rejected out of hand, all you're left with is...
Well, this is what I was going to say earlier about the way it's changed the consciousness of the demographic. Catherine McWhirter, was one of the first Balcombe residents who actually did take this on. There were 3 couples when I first got involved with it. There were only really 3 couples who were busy with it, coming from a similar background to me. And after West Sussex County Council gave Quadrilla permission to come back, she came and she said to the newspapers, she came out to the meeting and she said, there comes a point when you have to glue yourself to something, and I have come to that point.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people in communities like this. We've just had an article in the Times about Kirby Misperton with residents there saying, if I have to lie down on the tracks, I will.
Yeah.
And her little son saying, I'm there too. It's radicalising a generation.
Yeah.
Well, I think that when Third Energy, when Rathlin managed to persuade the East Riding Council and Humberside Police to evict the camp at Crawberry Hill under the guise of the Highways Act, I think they thought that they had managed to get rid of all the opposition. I don't think what they appreciated was that they had actually stimulated local opposition. And not only stimulated local opposition, but of course you now have this wonderful band of Jerry activists who the police just don't know how to deal with you, because they know you're all fine, upstanding bastions of the community, and that to arrest the group en masse is going to be such a PR own goal. It's backfired dramatically.
Can you tell us more about what you said to the policeman when you were arrested? You made such a powerful speech there.
Basically, I said that sooner or later there's going to be a lot more like us. That was the gist of it. You know, that I couldn't move from where I was, because that would be to condone what they were doing. But I just felt that if we walked away then, that, you know, nothing would have been achieved that day. It was important that we went through that process. But I must say, I'm still waiting for the masses, all of those who drive past us and honk support and thumbs up. I'm still waiting for them to come and stand alongside us instead of just driving past us. That the day that happens, that'll be brilliant.
Well, maybe they will when the trucks start rolling. Now, I want to just play a short trailer for a film that's being, or they're seeking to finance a film in Australia. And this is looking at it's going to be called the Bentley effect. Now, Bentley was seminal in Australia because, you know, there are something in the region of probably close on 20,000 fracked gas wells in Australia. But Bentley was seminal because Bentley is right at the heart of the major ecological communities there. If you can imagine Glastonbury, Totnes and Hebden Bridge all in the same area. That's like the Met Gasco site at Bentley. And on any day of the week, there were 700 plus people camping at Bentley. On the weekends, there was about 2,500. And when the New South Wales government announced that it was planning on sending in the riot police, the following weekend, there was 10,000 people there, which ultimately led to the New South Wales government repealing the Magasco licence on the basis that they clearly hadn't consulted with the community. So just take a look at this trailer.
We find ourselves in a time that we've never seen before.
Magasco says it's one well. My question is, what happens next?
Talking about thousands and thousands of wells, a complete transformation of the entire landscape.
In excess of 54% of the Australian continent is covered in gas licences and applications for licences.
This is a global issue. This same destructive technology is being rolled out right across the world. And we've got to remember, every one of those wells that are drilled and fracked, 20 to 100 tonnes of pure chemical goes down into the earth, and the majority of it stays there.
It is physically impossible to ensure that a well will not leak.
These are incredibly persistent chemicals. They are carcinogens, they're neurotoxins affecting the way we think and our children develop. They're endocrine disruptors, and they are active at such incredibly low doses.
We're essentially giving a private company the future water needs of this whole community. I mean, that's madness.
I mean, everybody knows what's going on. It's that human greed. And it's very prevalent in Australia, you know, everywhere you go. Everywhere you go.
When we view ourselves as protectors of the planet, we invite ourselves to dare to be great. And that's really, truly when the magic begins. This is what we are now doing. Our time has come.
We are the guardians of this land. We're the stewards of the country. And we should act like that.
Wisdom and compassion are capable of making enormous change.
The wisdoms that we inherit from the Indigenous people that have been here for so long is the value of water. You don't mess with the water.
We've got to protect the land base. We've got to protect the earth, otherwise our children will have nothing. You can only poison it once and it's gone.
Save our water!
You know, Jesus turned a few tables over.
When your back's to the wall, you must blockade as a human responsibility.
What we've seen, unfortunately, is the rise of extremists. There is no place for extremists.
Who are the extremists? Who are the conservatives?
We are being led by complete resource addicts, and we need to intervene, otherwise we'll lose everything.
If you don't stand up now and stop it, it's over.
People are just rising up.
Take your complaints off my land!
As the community, we are going to be here for 365 days of every year, and it actually doesn't matter what the riot police throw at us.
And it's a joy to be here. It makes you feel so connected. It's inspiring.
And I have a conscience, and I will not go away! When our leaders fail us, then ordinary people have got to become heroes.
It's as simple as that, isn't it? Bugger off.
So they are looking for the crowdfunding to finance a film focused on Bentley, and obviously the primary motivation here is to encourage people throughout Australia to try and prevent the industry from literally spreading like the cancer it has become in southern Queensland. Well, when I was over in Queensland, of course, I met with the Monk family, and David Monk made a very poignant and pertinent statement towards the end of the film, where they made the observation that basically if anyone's waiting for the saviour to be riding on in a white charger, they got a long wait coming. So listen to what David Monk has to say.
If at this point in time you can stand in front of a drill rig, then stop it from getting on. The easiest drill rig to stop's the first one. The hardest one will be the 10,000th. It'll be more than that though in the UK, because you're doing shale over there predominantly. Shale needs a lot of wells, leads a lot of destruction, poisons a lot of water.
If this gets the tiniest foothold, you know, you're done. So it's now or it's never. Don't think that you've got that long, because it's now or never. So you do it now, you stand up now, and you find something within yourself that you didn't think was there. You know, that's the important thing. You will be confronted by police. They wear their Kevlar suits, and it's a big intimidation thing.
Hey, you've got nobody in front of you. Keep walking. You're delaying this lady. Keep going. Don't push back on her. Keep moving. Now. If you've got to keep going. The officer will keep moving, please.
It's up to the people of the UK to get their cameras in the face of the Kevlar security, the Kevlar police who are paid by the corporations. And we have to say no. That's all it is. But it's more than just saying no at a meeting. It's intent. It's the intent of no. It's the knowing that you mean no. That's when you will be unbelievably powerful. You come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we are not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody's looking out for you. It's you.
Probably one of the most powerful moments of the whole documentary. And in fact, when Vanessa first saw it, it struck you too. And in fact, you actually created this next graphic from that. We'll pull this up on the screen. There we go. That's what David Monk said. He said, you come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we are not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody's looking out for you. It's you. And this is the crucial element. So
it brings to mind the phrase of, if you ever thought somebody ought to do something about this, may I remind you that you are somebody. If I had £1 for every time anybody has said, good luck with your campaign, or how's the fracking going, it's absolutely extraordinary how people expect. Still, there's this culture of hierarchy and leadership, and because of the corporate structure, that people think if you go on telly as a spokesperson or you create a Facebook page, people think you're running something and you'll do it. That's why I always say, if you see a job, it's yours, and if you have an idea, implement it. Don't write to me or you or anybody on Facebook and say, have you thought of doing this? People do that now. I say, great idea, let us know what happens. Let us know if you'd like us to network it. But we are all in this together like never before, to coin a major cliche. But yeah, when David said that, when I read that, well, I was already in tears from the moment of the two people standing in front of that truck. Because having been a bit of a part of that in Balcombe and a part of that in Barton Moss, having tried everything from petitions to knocking on the door of number 10, everything lawful, speaking in the European Parliament, social media, they didn't listen, it didn't work. So I haven't yet glued myself to anything, I haven't been arrested. But it says something about our so-called democracy when the only member of Parliament, our only Green member of Parliament, despite the number of votes that she got, that the Greens got, was prepared to put herself where her mouth is. She is the only one who came to the site, and she sat down in front of the gates of that site, and she got arrested, and she was led away by a policeman from her own constituency. What does that say about our democracy?
Well, as indeed were John and Val. John and Val, of course, were the first people to be arrested at Crawberry Hill. And, I mean, when you woke up that morning, was that your intention to get arrested? Did you ever expect to spend a chunk of the day in the police cells?
No, we were on our way down south to Sussex to see family, have a nice little break. And the only reason we went up to Crawberry was to give them some suntan lotion because it was baking hot day. But I think anybody that sees a young protector knocked over by a loader vehicle and sees the police tell the driver to go home and have a cup of tea and ignore the person that's knocked down, it's one of those moments where, as Vanessa said, as David Monk said, you've got to stand up and do something.
Well, you know, in the scheme of things, and with the benefit of hindsight, I would actually say that one of the best things that happened in East Yorkshire was the camp being evicted. I mean, it had been there, of course, for about 9 months, so it had served the purpose of being a focal point. It had certainly helped to raise a lot of awareness. But once the camp moved, then people realised, the local community realised that actually it was now down to them. And I you know, for what I see so far, people are stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, I mean, the key issue is vigilance. You know, apart from issues of direct action and so on. But the real reason why Rathling cannot stand the idea of people being at their camp is that that's the way we know about all the 18 breaches of the environment regulations. That's why we know about all the serious things that went wrong at West Newton. And that's why we know about what has gone wrong at Crawberry. And secrecy is what this industry thrives on, as everybody knows. And that's one of the issues the community, as you say, has to understand, that if there isn't a protection camp there 24/7, you've got to have an arrangement to keep tracks of these people, because if they can get away with it, they will. That's how the disaster starts.
But the other function, since the protection camp went, is that we've constantly reminded the community that the problem hasn't gone away. The site is empty at Crowbury. It looks like nothing's happening there, but we keep popping up all over the place, and people know. And we've sort of, in a small way, become celebrities, because people are really supportive. If that support manifested itself in people standing by the roadside with us, it would be huge.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, if the trucks do start rolling, then there is no question that the local community will get a lot of support from the rest of the country. And right now, of course, there is something in the region of about 24 sites around the country that are in various stages of the gas industry, the unconventional gas industry, attempting to become established. And I think that Cameron is certainly hoping that they can get as many kicking off concurrently as possible, so that the itinerant protection community is split so many ways. But what, of course, they don't realise is that the work that is going on in the local communities is so essential right now. And as we saw yesterday in Mission Springs, I think that when iGas start rolling in South Yorkshire, then it's not going to take too many itinerant protectors there, because the local population are determined to protect their village.
But it also reinforces Vanessa's point that as long as people think that they look at the news and see Balcombe or Barton Moss and think, yeah, well, that's great, aren't they wonderful people? If you've got 24 things going on locally, more and more people are going to realise that that news story is something that's affecting them in their village. And the time has come to stand up. But the fact that it's had big publicity and so on, the fact that fracking is now a word that is, out there, everybody knows about it, and all the opinion polls show that increasingly, there's that story of, the Sunday Times commissioned their regular opinion poll on attitudes to fracking and didn't publish it because it showed a growth in the number of people that do not want any fracking near them.
Yeah. It's gone from 43 to 29. Only 29% of people think it's a good idea.
That's right.
Which basically means
the Times won't publish that because it's not what they thought they were going to publish.
Exactly. 71% don't think it's a good idea.
An even smaller percentage of the population that voted for the Tories.
A much smaller percentage.
But not that well. Yeah.
Well, hey guys, so I'm going to see you on on Wednesday evening, I think, prior to the council meeting. Going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds.
Let's hope, Ian, that you'll be filming that in the morning, and this time, because they've just had their breakfast, some of the councillors will actually stay awake through the proceedings.
I think the bottom line is that, in my opinion, there were a number of East Riding councillors at the last meeting who were blatantly abusing their office, because they are not put in those positions to catch up on their lost sleep. And that's clearly what they were doing last time.
But Ian, Margaret Chapman MBE was re-elected, believe it or not. The one that was fast asleep in the front row is re-elected.
Amazing. We'll ask her the question when she walks into the chamber, whether she got a good night's sleep. Vanessa, thanks for joining us this evening. Any last words to the establishment? I mean, the vast majority of people who watch Fracking Nightmare these days are members of the establishment, the gas industry and the police. So, just to let you know, we know what you're doing, and we're very happy that you know what we're doing. And this hydra that we're creating around the country is going to be very difficult to stop.
Indeed. We're not going away. I'm personally stepping back. Some people are letting other people take over the batons, but this is the biggest environmental movement that has ever happened, possibly planet-wise. There's been GM, there's been the nuclear issue, but something about the fracking issue, about the violatory element, all that goes with it, it has woken up a lot of people, and a lot of people are not having it. We're just not having it. And I also want to thank you. One of the reasons I accepted the invitation to come and do this is because you have done as much as anyone, more than many, many people for this cause and this campaign since we first met at the Balkan camp. You have the courage to ask the difficult questions, and you get a lot of flack for that from certain people who don't want to ask those questions. And I just want to show some solidarity and gratitude for what you've done, because you have not stopped. You have no ulterior motive. You have no agenda. You're not making money out of this. And you're just speaking the truth wherever you see it and asking the questions.
Well, thank you for that. But if you think that I can stop this alone, you're very much mistaken.
No, you can't.
This is a team effort, and this country has some 60 million people. We don't need 60 million people to get behind us, although it'd be amazing if they did. Just 2 or 3%, 2 or 3% of the population of this country, that's enough to hold the politicians' feet to the fire. And collectively, the collective we can stop this. And I obviously believe we will stop it. So for those of you who still hold iGas stock, it's not quite in the bottom of the toilet bowl yet, but it's heading in that direction. So take my counsel, get out now. Anyway, thanks, Vanessa. Thanks for joining me, and thank you for your kind words.
Pleasure.
John, Val, thanks again. It's always a pleasure to have you on Fracking Nightmare. Yeah. And here's hoping that East Riding Council Planning Committee do the right thing on Thursday, and then the North York Moors Planning Committee do the right thing on the 18th, and Lancashire County Council Planning Committee do the right thing on June the 23rd at Preston. So those are the dates for your diary. It's Beverley on this coming Thursday, Helmsley, North Yorkshire on Thursday the 18th, and Preston Town Hall on Tuesday the 23rd of June. Between us, we're going to shut this down. Thanks. See you in a couple of weeks.